Hello and welcome to What's Bubbling at ZIM. In this bubbling, we're going to take a look at blobs, the ZIM blob class, and this is part 2. So there was a prior bubbling on blobs, and this is the second bubbling. We're going to take a look at how we can save a blob from one session to another, and also how to, what's going on with these custom blobs. How do we specify custom blobs? Okay, let's go take a look at what we were doing last time. We had made a blob here, and we had it so that when we hit press, it recorded this blob, this strange fish blob or whatever we've got here at the moment. We recorded it so that when we launch again, it starts up that way. But that was kind of a two-step process where we collected the information from here using the record method. We don't want the end user to have to do that to be able to save that. They probably couldn't. So that's all right for you to author blobs that you want to show in your project, and maybe as a starting point for them to author. But if you're really wanting them to just sort of save where they got to, you'll probably want to use something like local storage. Of course, you could take this information. This is the information to recreate the blob. You could take that information and store it in a database, which means they could get it from any computer, or they could even share their blob creations with people. But we'll just do the one where, hey, they close their browser, next time they come back, oh, hey, here's my blob that I made last time, and that's what we'll do in this bubbling. Okay, and we'll also take a look a bit in the detail about what's in those numbers as well, like what those things are. All right, let's go back into the code here. We're in ZIM 5.1.0 for blobs. And we had made a simple blob where we passed in these points that we recorded. And we also have a button that when we click on it, we can see the recording. And by setting it to true, well, we don't really want to do that. I mean, that's one technique, and you can take a look back. Well, just delete that. You can take a look back at the last bubbling to find out what we were doing there. And indeed, just as a refresher, if I didn't have all of this data and we just said the number of points, say 2, then here's what it would look like. Open in browser. Now we have a blob with just 2 points. Okay. Let's set that to a blob with, well, we'll do 8, I suppose. And now what we're trying to do is anytime we change the blob, we want to remember the change. Okay, so that means a change event. So we say simple. Let's increase the size of this a bit so you can see. Simple dot on change. We will call this function right here. Okay, now the change event will trigger anytime we let go or mouse up, press up, I guess, on the simple blob's controls. If you want to capture the change all the time, so as I'm spinning the controls, they're not actually recording a change. You could put a mouse or a press move on simple and record it that way. But anyway, we figured probably good enough to just get the information about the blob when you press up. So that's in here. And the information is gotten with simple.record. Simple.record. So that gets the information as an array. And what we'll do is we'll try and save that in local storage. So if local storage, we'll just test for local storage, although because we're Canvas, almost everything that can run the Canvas can run local storage. So if there is local storage, then we can say local storage dot simple equals. Now you can't quite do it that way. This is an array. That's an array of arrays, or in other words, a multi-dimensional array. This is an array, and the local storage accepts strings. Strings are numbers. So we need to JSON.stringify that. JSON is JavaScript object notation. It just takes our array, our multi-dimensional array, and turns it into a string. Okay, no problem there. It's quite simple. And by turning that into a string, we're now allowed to store that in local storage. We won't know the X and Y position of that though. It will record the shape of the blob, but if we drag the blob around and position it, we might want to record that too. So let's just make an array of information. If we have lots of information we want to store, such as it's simple.x, comma, simple.y, comma, and then the third one's going to be the recording. So there we go. We now have an array of 3 bits of data that we want to store, and we can stringify all of that. If we wanted to, we could have put that in an object literal, and we could have said object literal squiggly brackets, that is, x colon simple.x, y colon simple.y, and data colon simple.record. We could do that too, and then stringify all that up. Later when we get it, we would access them by x, y, and data. In this case, we're stringifying just an array of those 3 things, so we'll have to remember that the first 2 elements of the array are the x and y, and the last element is the data that we want. Okay, great. So that's storing that in local storage. Now, when we first arrive, though, we don't always want to make a blob with 8 points. If we already have in our local storage some data for simple, then we want to make the blob that way. So we're going to make 2 different blobs. We'll set it up so we can make 2. One for if there's already data recorded, one for if there isn't. And we do that with an if statement. You heard me saying if a lot there. So if local storage, so if there's local storage and local storage dot simple, that's all we need. So if that exists, then we'll do this stuff. Else we'll do that stuff. In each case, we'll just call it simple. So we'll copy that up top and declare the simple variable. We'll cut this stuff from here and paste it like that. So if we've declared it here, that we can use in both cases, there it is in both cases, then we don't need to declare it inside the if statement. So if there's local storage and there's already data, then we don't want a point of 8. We'll have to fix that. Else, but if there's no data yet, then we just do what we did before. We just make something with a point of 8, or a blob with 8 points. All right, so what do we want to put in here? Well, now we want to get our data from localStorage.simple. So why don't we save our data is equal to localStorage.simple so that we don't have to keep on typing that again. And also that just a bit easier for me to understand. So the position were the first 2 things. That's data at 0 and data at 1, like that. And the points was data at 2. So 0 is the first element of the array, 1's the next, and 2 is the third. Okay, so that's great. Now that will work mostly. I think we're going to get into a little bit of a snag, but let's just see if it works. So we save that and refresh here. Well, that's more of a snag than I expected. Oh, I know why. Our data is a string. Remember? We stringified the data in simple. So now we need to parse it. So our data needs JSON.parse, and in round brackets, there we are, turning what was a string, a JSON string, back into an array, if we spell parse right. So now data is that array that will have data at 2, data at 0, and data at 1. Some of you may have caught that already and going, but inventor Dan's in. Hey, you have to JSON.parse that. Okay, so we save that up and let's try it again and refresh. And there's our information right there, I guess. I'm surprised it's down where it is. So be it. And let's change that up a bit. We'll change it into almost like a strange yin and yang looking thing. Okay, and then I close this or just hit refresh again, and it's just how it was. Neat, huh? So I'll turn that off just temporarily and I'll refresh. Now it's turned on and it's saving our stuff. So if I put it right here and refresh, it might actually, oh, hey, that's right. That was the bit of glitch that I was talking about. Look, I moved that and put it there and I refresh and it didn't save where it was. Do you know why? Because I've moved it and I have not yet changed the controls. So the controls, if I change the controls, it will remember. So here, I'm going to change the control. Wow. Okay. And now I'll refresh. I have a feeling it's behind it. Yeah, there it is behind it. So we also maybe should record when we're saving this, we should record what level it's on as well if we were trying to save a collage. And that's just more information that we could store inside of here. Hey, what child index are we at? But I do want to record the fact that it's moving its X and Y position. Did you catch that? If we don't make a change to the Bezier curves, it doesn't record the X and Y. So really, we want two events here. So let's, if we want two events doing the same thing, we also want simple dot on press up, comma, we'll just call it record. Well, maybe not record. How about, because isn't there a record? I can't remember. Is there a record? Yeah, simple.record. We'll call it something different so you don't get confused. We will call it set data or something. There, are you less confused? Set data. So in both cases, we just want to set data like so. Okay, so when we press up on it, we'll set data, and when we change the Bezier curves, we'll set data. And then this becomes the function set data, like so, and it doesn't need a little round bracket at the end, because it's no longer literal passed directly in as a second parameter. Okay, got that? So we have a function called set data that's going to record X and Y as well, and we're calling that both when we press up on simple, which will happen after we drag it, and when we change the Bezier curves. So I refresh here. It's annoying. There it is. So we'll move that over here. Start. Now, let's see. How can we test this? So we'll move that out. That looks great. And we'll do that. So obviously, it's going to save that one. So when I refresh, didn't save the position of that one, but we didn't ask it to. It did indeed save this. Refresh again. Sure enough, that's saved. Let's try moving this without changing the Bezier curves. That was the press up. So when I went like press up, that was press up. So now it should have saved the fact that it wants to be here as well. And we refresh, and sure enough, it is saved to be down below. Now it didn't save the control points, but I think you can do that. So all we need to do is, as we're setting the data, we have to find out the controls, whether it's, should we do it? We just go simple dot controls. Well, we'll tuck it at the end. So, so that we don't have to change our numbers for anything else. The last thing, the fourth thing that we'll save is simple dot controls, like that. I think that's it. Should we look at the documentation on simple just to make sure that we have a controls property? Okay, so we go here and we'll open up ZIM, go into the docs, type in blob. Isn't that fun? Now, blobs. Here's what you can pass in: a color, the border color, points, radius, control length, control type, show controls. Show controls is the way that you pass in at the beginning, but if we scroll down here to the properties, right there, controls. Boolean to get or set the visibility of the controls. Or you can use a show controls method, but that will do us. So controls is what it is. So we're going to record the control setting. That's a Boolean that will either say, are you showing the controls or not showing the controls? And now when we go ahead and make our one right here, when we make it, we will say, comma, show controls, colon. Now it will be whatever's in data 4. Copy that, or 3, yeah, comma. So 0 is X, 1 is the Y, 2 is the point data, and 3 will be whether we want to show the controls. So we save that up, refresh, And well, I guess that worked because the controls weren't showing. Now I've moved that. I'm not showing the controls, and I refresh. And hey, isn't that cool? Now the controls aren't showing. Show the controls and refresh. Oh, now the controls aren't showing. Crap, you know why? Because we didn't change any of the Bezier controls. So, darn. So we changed the Bezier controls. Now we've recorded it, and I refresh. There's no controls. If I hide them like that and refresh, we haven't recorded. We record if we drag. Now it's recorded refresh. But if we just double click, there was no recording ever because we haven't dragged. We haven't changed the Beziers. Okay, so come back in here. We're almost there. We just need another one here. And that would be simple dot on double click is lowercase. Yeah, so simple dot on double click, because if we just turn off the controls, then we'll want to remember that that we turned off the controls or on the controls. Refresh here. Now, let's see. I double click to say, I want to see the controls. That's all we've done. Refresh here. Sure enough, it shows. Double click to say, I don't want to see the controls. Refresh. No controls. Yay! Okay. Now, what else I wanted to do in this bubbling? We should revel. We should say, oh, ooh, 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 that was good. But what else we want to do is just take a look at the data that we're actually putting in here. What does it mean? Can we make our own data manually? What would that be like? And we'll take a look at this second blob down here to talk about that. So as we come in, here's the second blob. We're giving it a color. That's great. Now, we've given it a control type of free by default. So if we didn't have that there, then the control type would be straight by default. So this is sort of specifying a default control type of free for all of them. We could do that up here in that simple one as well. Anyway, we could just say control type right here. Control type colon, how about none? How about none? Let's just see what that looks like. So if we said control type none, then it would default to a control type of none. For us to be able to see that, we have to clear the local storage though. So we go local storage dot clear. That's handy for you to know how to do anyway. And that just means it won't remember any of, well, it will remember the storage, but next time we start up, it will, or this time when we set up, it's going to clear it first, and so forth. So we save that and refresh. We should see there is, oh, but they're not set at none. So what happened there? Oh, not control type, sort of control type, but the full word control, go figure. The full word control type of none. So we save that and refresh. By the way, because it didn't recognize that, it's just set them as straights as the default. But if I refresh now, you can see that our control type is back to that. So we could change that if we wanted to. Ooh, there's like a neat new helmet that we could give this guy. All right. Anyway, I may have shown you that in the last one. It's sounding familiar, actually. But, hey, there's a review of it. So, where'd we get to? So, by default, the control type will be free on this second one. Here's the points now. And we passed in an array. And it's an array of control sets, we could call it. So that means, what this one means is that point will be at 0, 0, so that's where the control container is. This is the circle inside it. So the next one is the circle point itself. That's where the circle is relative to the control point. So you got that, each of those things there, each of these things is, I call it a set, is the control circle, and the control rectangle and control rectangle 2, or rectangle 1, rect 1, rect 2 sort of thing. And that's a container, so that they all move together like that. Now, you can specify where the point is, and you can also specify where the circle is with respect to the point. And that's why it's a 0, 0, because it's like right where they're at the same place. This one, though, well, I think this is actually the first control point. it just happens to be, if I remember correctly, is at minus 100 and 100 down. So minus 100x and 100 down. Minus 100 and 100 down, because down is positive. So that's the one control point. Why don't we change that to 50? 50, 50. So I save that and I refresh here. There it is at only 50, 50 rather than 100, 100. So there I am specifying that. Okay. We've also said that that control point will be straight. Fine. I'll undo that and put it at 100, 100. This is the second one. It's at 100 and minus 100. And if we take a look, 100 over and minus 100 takes you up to this control point right here. Okay, that's that control point specified. Here's another one. And in this case, we've said the position of this will be at 100, comma, minus 100. So 100 over and minus 100. So this one was at 100 in the minus and 100 up. So the center of this is here. So if we were to take that and say dot outline like so, and save this, refresh. There it is. There's the center of our blob, and one control point is at minus 100, minus 100. The other one is at 100 over and minus 100 up. So do you see that? Okay. And then our point is at that, and our control points are placed on that like so. So that would be these control points that we're seeing right here, minus 50 and plus 100. So minus 50 is the one, and plus 100 is the other. Sometimes the order of those, like you can't tell because it could have been spun around. So, and in both cases, 0 in the y. Now this will default to a control type of free because that's what we've specified there. So they should be yellow. And indeed they are yellow, and indeed it is free. Okay, so free is they're independent from one another. Ooh, that's a nice blob, isn't it? Like that little whale. Little whale swimming in the water under the sun. The strange sun. Under the Pac-Man. Chomp, 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 chomp. Anyway, that's enough of that. Okay, so the next two are a little bit unusual because they only have a point position and they have no placement for these. So no placement for the circle, no placement for the rectangles. In that case, they'll default to zeros. And because they default to zeros relative to the point, they're in a sense right behind the point there where you can't see them. That's this one and this one. The control points are behind there. When we double click, there they are, and now I can drag them out. But otherwise, that's just like saying there aren't any control points, in which case, even though they would default to free, because they have no dimensions, they're given a none value for their control types. Yay! We've got the double clicking, and we've got a border color and a border width, and that's pretty good. That was sort of all I wanted to show you in this second bubbling. Aside from the ability to animate, let me just show you where, I won't go into it yet. It's possible we could do a future bubbling, but we'll just go into the documentation and just show you that when you go and get the properties, you can ask for the points. When you ask for the points, you are given it's almost exactly the same, except the set is the object. So that's the whole object that includes the circle. It's the container that includes the circle, the rectangle, and the rectangles. Okay. The next parameter when you ask for points is the circle itself. And then the next one is the rectangle and the second rectangle. And then the control type. So it's almost the same, except it's not X and Y positions. It's the actual objects themselves that you're getting. So let's play with that just a little bit then. So afterwards, after we make it, if we say, what is this thing called? It's called blob dot, now points like that will get us an array of things. So if we want the first set of points, we would say at 0. So this will give me the first control points. And if we want to animate the whole control point, so we want to move the whole control point, we would say at 0. That would get us the set. The set is the container that holds the circle and the rectangles. So I'm going to say, let's position that dot pose at 0, 0. All right, and let's see what happens. Refresh here. What do you think will happen? It didn't work. Ah, right. Anytime you manually change something like that, it's a good point, an excellent point. We can't tell. You just move that. You've got to update it. So that's where you call update blob, like that. So we've just moved that, and we would say blob dot update. That's excellent. I'm glad I remembered that. So blob.update, and or is it resize? That's stage.update. Let's just go check the docs on that. So we look under methods, update right there. Update the blob if animating control points, etc. You'd usually do this in a ticker, and I gave you an example of that in another place. But anyway, we're going to blob.update, and we refresh here. There we go. So the control point has moved to 0, 0. Relative to the blob. So the blob, remember, its registration points in the middle, or its X and Y is at the middle. So we've just moved it relative to that. So we didn't move the control point to this 0, 0 of the stage. To do that, we would have to find out where that 0, 0 of the stage is in the coordinate space of the blob. Okay, which can be tricky. Usually you don't have to do that, but yeah, I guess I can show you it. Position 0, 0. So what you do is you would say var point is equal to blob dot, and we want to find out what the global spot is of a local thing. So that's locally. No, let's see. It's global to local. This is like working in an inception or something like that. Global to local, and then we would say 0, 0, 0, 0. So where is the 0, 0 position globally? Where does that show up locally inside of blob? So that converts the point, and then we say point.x and point.y. Oh, I really didn't want to show you this at the very end of this. Your brains are probably already exploding. And we refresh here. And there it's moved the control point to 0, 0 of the stage. That is quite the look, isn't it? Hello, I am some sort of strange alien with my head stuck in the corner. Okay. So animating's a bit easier than what we just did there. If we wanted to wiggle that point, for instance, we could say, we could take that point and wiggle it. So there's the point that we had. Why don't we wiggle the second point? Okay, so there's the second point, dot wiggle, like so. And we would specify information on the wiggling. Let's see, first of all, what are we wanting to wiggle? How about the Y property of it? And we will start off with the Y property. Where is the Y property of this whole thing? It's at the Y property of itself. So unfortunately, that looks like this, dot Y. So that would get its current Y position. And then we'll wiggle it a minimum of 20 and a maximum of 40. And we'll wiggle it in a minimum time of 1 second to a maximum time of 2 seconds. There we go. Okay. So there we are wiggling the point. Now we've got a problem where it's going to update the blob once, but that's it. It won't update the blob anymore. So now here's where we would put that into a ZIM.ticker dot add a function. There's that little star coming from. I like that star, so I don't mind getting it too much. It must be because we're doing what's bubbling on a blob that we keep on getting that little star showing up. So we're missing round bracket there. And by the way, I mentioned it a couple bubblings ago that we no longer have to specify the stage here. Yay, it'll just take the default first stage that was made. So we save that up, and what we're doing here is we're adding a function that is going to update the blob in the ticker. Okay, so this is constantly updating the blob so that as we wiggle the point, we see that blob change. And a refresh here. And something went wrong. Let's just take a look. Probably one of these. Something is not set. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. There's the point. Add the blob.update. Looks good. It must have something to do with my wiggle. This is a ZIM wiggle, which can go on the blob's point. I'm asking for the y, blob's point.y. Let's just zog what the blob's point.y is. Make sure that we're not making things up. Comment out these guys for now. Oop. Actually, that's a good point. I could have just tried to find out which one of those was causing the problem. 0. Okay, so it knows that the y is at 0. Why is the second one at 0? Because this is 0, that's 1. The second one's y should have been minus 100, I think. And yet we're getting a 0. So this is, oh shoot, that's not the second point. This is the second point, and that's it's okay. So now this should be minus 100. Refresh, minus 100, which it is. I wonder if now it'll just work because we were animating the wrong thing. I don't think so though. So wiggle the y of blob's point. Oh, we have to change him in here. Swaparoo. Oh, hey, I teach interactive media. This is what it's like always the last 5 minutes of class. So now you get it at the last minute of a bubbling. It's exciting. You can, you know, we're dealing with problem solving, which or debugging, which always happens. So blob points at 0, that should be fine. And then we wiggling the y property of that. We saw it had a y property. This is the current position of that, which should hopefully work. Let's just see what happens. Refresh. Yeah, it's wiggling. Okay, so there goes the point wiggling. But I have a feeling that we didn't run the ticker. So do you see what happened there? And now let's run the ticker. We're going to add the function and say blob.update. So hopefully this wasn't where we had the error. No, error. Hey, everything's working right. So it's just that little one error that we had. Look at that. It's wiggling the blob. Cool, huh? Hello there, wiggling wave. I wonder what happens. I think if we copy it, do I have a copy on here? Yeah. If we copy it, the copy doesn't wiggle. It would have been pretty nice if all these waves wiggled, huh? Should we make all the waves wiggle? Oh, whatever. Oops. There we go. Anyway, wiggling waves amongst the pretty sun. This has been a very long bubbling on some of the nuances and pleasantries of blobs. I just love them. I hope that you really you know, make some exciting things here, and not only you make exciting things, but allow other people to make exciting things. You know, we've just given them dynamic drawing tools on the canvas with ZIM. So I'm pretty excited about that. Hopefully you are too. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has been What's Bubbling at ZIM. I'm inventor Dan Zen. Have a great day. Or night. Yeah, even if it's night. Probably is night. Ciao.